that there is a war out there on every single one of these, on creation. And we're being told that we shouldn't even be having homegrown gardens because it actually increases the greenhouse gases. So, if we're not recognizing it for what it is, we're going to buy into this lie because we hear it again and again and again. And what they're doing is they are conditioning us to believe a lie. Because the saying goes that if you listen to something long enough, it becomes truth. And because we're bombarded with this information, it's actually reprogramming our brain. So we need to be really, really careful about what we believe and what we put into our mind. So we talked about last night and this morning. This is where I always start. So we see again, because I'm kind of coming at it from a different viewpoint this time. We see then that in 1:11, that Genesis 1:11, that God says He's going to make the grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit. We see that He says, I'm going to make it. And then in verse 12, He actually does create it. And then in 1:29, we are told then that this is your diet, that behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is a face upon all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. So here we're talking about a high fruit diet. And then we are told that then in 2:15 through 17, that God commanded our diet. We talked about that last night. We talked about it this morning. But this is really important to understand because I'm kind of looking at it from a different viewpoint now, and I want you to look at it from a different viewpoint, that God has commanded now a high fruit diet. This is His command to us. And yet, if there's one food group that we are quick to believe a lie, and that is to give up fruit. Fruit does all sorts of bad things to our body, and because that's what we hear over and over and over again. But I don't even use research anymore. I am a researcher. I'm a doctor of research, and yet I love research. I've read thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of articles. I know what the research says, but yet I bring in no more research because we have become people of the research. We're no longer people of the Word. We are people that you want to give me your opinion because of the research you found, and then I give you my opinion of the research I found, and we're not consulting what God actually says. And so I say, let's throw the research out for now. There's a place for it, absolutely. But first, before we go to the research, let's get back to the Word. Let's see what God has to say first, and then we know what research is right or wrong. And because we don't know what our research, what the Bible or Spirit of Prophecy says, now we're just going off in all these crazy directions with our diet, and everyone's just kind of lost. And I'm going to give you an example. Like 20 years ago and prior, you would only find research that was negative against coffee. But yet our council says drinking tea and coffee is a sin. That's a direct quote. Drinking tea and coffee is a sin. And yet our people who have not read that, they come to me with the research saying, well, see, look at this research article I found. Coffee is really good. Look at all the antioxidants. And then maybe look at it reduces my risk of cancer and diabetes. And you see, coffee is really good. You see how it's my opinion versus your opinion now? And it's my research against your research, and we're just confused. We as Adventists are a very intellectual group of people around the world. We have more head knowledge than we do heart knowledge. And we need to kind of start combining the two. And getting back to the Word. And so we are told from Genesis to Revelation that our diet is to be a high fruit diet. Because now, let's go to Revelation 22:2, and it says, in the midst of the street of it and on either side of the river was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the trees were for the healing of the nations. So again, we go over chapter 3:1 in Genesis, that the serpent was the most subtle beast of the field. And then in the exact same verse, the next sentence, now Satan is saying, but didn't God say that you could eat of every tree? Well, yes, he did, but he also said, but don't eat of that one. See, it's a half-truth, half-lie. Our counsel, I don't care what the research says, our counsel says that God says he has commanded our diet in 2:16, that he's commanded our diet. Okay, so that's where we need to start, that he's commanded it. So now we can put away all that research that says if you've got cancer, if you've got diabetes, if if you have weight problems, don't have fruit because fruit's the problem. See, a little red flag should come up and say, well, God says that we're supposed to eat fruit. And see, we're so bombarded with the research and what all these people of the world and their voices say that we need to give up fruit, that we've come to be a group of people who really don't even eat much fruit anymore, and if we do, we have it for dessert, rather than like the main dish. And so I wanted to lay that foundation. And so we know that as I talked about this morning, that God has not given us the health message for the primary reason of health and longevity, because they already had longevity in the Garden of Eden. He's given us the health reform message to make his people holy, and it's to show us it's a test of obedience. Are we going to obey God and live? And are we going to see it as drudgery? Like, oh, God, come on, is that all I'm going to have? I don't like fruit, God. Instead of saying, you know what, God, I'm just understanding I'm supposed to like fruit because that's the Garden of Eden diet, and that's where we're supposed to be going in the new heaven and earth. Will you help me to like fruit? Instead, my taste buds rule. They rule everything. It's like my taste buds become my God, and how I was raised and what I like and what I don't like. See, now that becomes my God. And we have actually literally made our taste buds our God before God. We were told that if we are in disobedience, we will die. This is not a message of condemnation. It's a message of love. How is it that we have turned God's love letter to the world, we've turned it into, God is a cruel tyrant because he wants to tell me what to eat or how to live or how to believe. Somehow we've kind of turned it around upside down, and it doesn't have the taste that it used to. But God is just trying to save us. You see, he's trying to save us through this love letter to us. These are, if you want to be saved, these are the conditions in which we have to meet. This is not legalism. This is love, because Jesus himself said, if you love me, keep my commandments. You see, we don't eat the way that we do in order to be saved. We eat the way that we do because we are saved. It is totally different. One is a message of Pharisees, and one is a message of love and grace and mercy, and just our complete adoration of who Jesus is and what he's done for us. So we see that in our disobedience we will die, and we surely will die. And it's been from Genesis all the way through that disobedience that we will die. We have seen that Satan has turned the most wholesome fruit into fermented food and beverages, and he throws fungicides and pesticides and herbicides and genetically modified everything now. And now we don't even want to eat fruit because of the pesticides. And that's a very common response that people give me, but we're going to get there. When we look at some of the problems of our health of today, we can see, I mean, at least me as a researcher, the message is clear in the research. I can get a high fruit diet as either out of the Bible, or if I'm strictly looking at it from a secular viewpoint in the research, because even the research is very clear that if we are trying to reverse and prevent disease, we need a high fruit diet. And fruit is the main food group that the entire world is lacking. And it's the one food group that has increased, because we're eating less and less of it every year. It's the one food group that is increasing our risk of every single disease. So we see that, let's take a look at fruit. And some of these, let's break this down. So we see that fruit is composed of phytochemicals, antioxidants, bioflavonoids, vitamins, minerals, fiber. We have to have these components when it comes to healing. And there's no other food group on the planet like there is with fruit. And we see that if we don't have all these phytochemicals and antioxidants, you know how there's different colored peppers. There you got orange and yellow and red. And the green, by the way, is unripe fruit. And it's like a green banana. And you see all the, purple cabbage and green cabbage, and we have all these vibrant colors. We have oranges and greens and yellows and purples and, all these vibrant colors. Those different colors represent a different phytochemical and antioxidants. It's those particular plant chemicals that give them that color. And so there's a lot of truth to eat the rainbow. And so we also see that fruit has no cholesterol, no saturated fat. It's low in sodium and fat and calories compared to other food groups. It is also very high in simple carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates are how God has created us actually to run. We function off of high fruit. Even though the world leads us to believe that one sugar is the same as another sugar. And that can't be farthest from the truth. They say that the fruit that comes in mangoes and bananas and papayas and oranges is the same sugar that comes from candy and chocolate and Twinkies and all of that sugary stuff. The world wants us to believe that yes, both are a simple sugar. And yes, our body does run off of simple sugars, but it has to be the proper kind of simple sugar. And that is God's food. Because now it's God's food has all of the phytochemicals and the antioxidants and the bioflavonoids and all the fiber, where the processed sugar, simple foods, doesn't have any of that. They're just completely, they're a world apart to where we should not even have the same terminology. That's the same as one fat is not the same as the other, one carbohydrate is not the same as another, and one protein is not the same as the other. But the world wants us to believe that an avocado fat is the same as a fat that comes from animal fats and oil, processed oils, including grapeseed oil, olive oil. They're just not the same. And again, the definition of a real food is something that has vitamins, minerals, protein, carbohydrates, fat, and it's got constituents. There's actually a health value to it. There's no health value in that way when it comes to oil. It's just simply a processed foods that's been marketed to us as a health food. When we look at the research, what they're doing is, okay, yes, so some of the oils are better than other oils, but that's comparing the oil to oil. But when you look at a whole food plant-based diet with whole food oil, the nuts, the seeds, the avocado, the olives, and then you compare it to a whole food plant-based diet with its fat from free fat, that's where we see the difference. That all fats are inflammatory when you compare it to a whole food plant-based fat diet. So we have to know what we're looking at, when we're looking at some of these studies, and they've kind of gotten us off track a little bit. And we see that all fruit has amino acids. That's something fairly new, I'd say, within the last 5 years. we now know that all fruit has all amino acids. We used to think that fruit had no protein. Technically, it doesn't. It's got amino acids. It's the amino acids that are the building blocks. So when we are looking at beans, for example, with high protein, and we are looking at animal proteins, the world wants us to believe that they're the same thing, because the food guide pyramid has the beans in with the animal proteins, because they're both high protein, but they can't be, again, farther worlds apart. The animal proteins are an actual complete protein, or I shouldn't even say that, but it's a chain. So like a woman's pearl necklace, it's all one strand, where each one of those pearls is an amino acid, and then it's the strand that brings them all together of what we consider to be a whole protein. And when you have plant proteins, though, they really aren't proteins, because the protein is the complete chain. Plant proteins are really amino acids, where every pearl is an individual amino acid, but they come into our body already broken down. The strand is not there. So that's the difference. And it takes a huge amount of energy for our body to break down animal proteins of all kind, whether it's cheese or any other kind of dairy, any animal product, eggs. It takes a huge amount of dietary effort to break these things down, where it can even stay into our body to completely break down like 3 days, up to 3 days, where for most plants, they're gone in like 24 hours, even if it's high protein, or like beans or the amino acids. So they are not the same at all. And we can also look at, so we looked at the carbohydrate, protein, fat. They're just worlds apart. So we cannot look at them the same. And we've already got our marching orders. If we did not ever read research or hear anybody else's opinion about diet, and we were just to read the Bible, we would be a people that had a high fruit diet, because that's what we get in the Bible. Now, remember, I've said it before, and I want to remind us that the Bible is a timeline from the beginning of time until the end of time. And we are way over here, and God has had a particular dietary regimen in every part of history. And we kind of talked about through some of them this morning. So we went through, in the Garden of Eden, it was a high fruit diet, and there was no vegetables. Immediately after sin, the vegetables that were made for animals, now God gave humans the permission to eat vegetables. And those would be the vegetables like you pull up roots, like our potatoes and carrots and things that you have to actually pull up the entire plant, where you kill it. In the Garden of Eden, there's not going to be any plants. We're not going to have any root vegetables, for example, because you kill the whole plant. There's not going to be any death. And I'll get questions at the end. And so we see then that after sin, added vegetables. After the flood, God gave, in Leviticus 11, clean and unclean meat, which was fine in that particular time in history. It wasn't fine prior to that, but that was fine because now all the vegetation is gone. But then during the Exodus, now God is saying, okay, the flood is over with, and there's no need to eat animals anymore. There's plenty of vegetation. I want you to go back to a vegetation diet. And so that's a whole food, plant-based. And then, so now that's reinforced then in Daniel. And then we also see that there is the Nazirite vow, which was appropriate for that time. And then we see then the diet of the redeemed since 1844. And then we see that we're heading on into heaven. So you see the timeline of kind of like these different diets, but it's always moving this way. We don't go back. And so from Genesis to Revelation, and if we're way over here, and the Bible's a timeline from the beginning of time to the end, and we're heading on into heaven, why are we justifying going way back to Leviticus 11 that I'm okay to eat clean and unclean meats? You see, we're going backwards. There's no justification for it because we're to be moving forward into heaven. And God wants us to be in that process of removing our animal products. So we see also that we can eat fruit in abundance with less concern of weight gain. It eliminates toxins at a cellular level. It's calorically life-sustaining. That means that if we were only to eat fruit and we got enough calories, we would actually live quite healthfully for a while. We would be low in some minerals and if we just in fat. So if we just added a few nuts and seeds and add some greens, the greens are then what balances out that mineral deficiency, and we get everything we need right there. And that's in the research. And I'm going to talk more about that in the next talk for Nebuchadnezzar. You're going to be amazed. And so we see also that fruit eliminates our cravings. And if you're dealing with any kind of cravings, any kind of addictions, any kind, fruit is the way to go because it cleanses at a cellular level. And then there's no other food group that has a nutrient panel like fruit does. It's very rich in fiber, vitamin A, C, folate, potassium, calcium, iron. And then when we look at the things that are low in animal products, we see this huge long list of vitamin C, E, K, B9, B7, flavonoids, antioxidants, anti-inflammatory properties, dietary fiber, complex carbohydrates, chlorophyll, prebiotics, sulforaphane, magnesium, natural nitrates. These are more components that we absolutely have to have if we want good health or if we want to reverse or prevent disease. When this Satan's war on fruit, you may have not thought about it like this, but I'm sure that you've heard of at least some of these diets, and maybe you've even been on one of these diets or might be on one of them right now. But this is Satan's war on fruit right here, because all of these fad diets, they exclude or severely limit the amount of fruit that we have. So the Atkins diet, the South Beach, the Zone, the Protein Power, Eat for Your Blood Type, ketogenic, paleo, carnivore diet, all of these are a type of Satan's war on fruit. What they're saying is you eat all the meat that you want and all the high fat and all the protein that you want, but don't eat anything with carbohydrates, especially don't eat fruit. And they do allow vegetables, and they come up with all of this flowery language because of the glucose content is very low in vegetables and very high, but it doesn't hold water when it doesn't matter what the world says. Because if we know what the word says, which is our love letter from God, we automatically know that this is not the right diet. Any of these are not the right one. So we have many misconceptions about fruit, and how they got out there is beyond me. Other than I know that Satan is running around like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. So we're told don't eat bananas and grapes, they're going to make you fat with carb overload. If that were true, I would need to be on a weight loss program. I have been eating bananas probably every day for almost 30 years. So it's like, where does that come from? Mangoes and cherries have too much sugar. Don't eat those. Cranberries are going to cause kidney stones. Oranges can erode your tooth enamel. And again, if that were true, I wouldn't have any teeth because I eat oranges probably every single day. And I have no teeth problems. Don't eat limes because they can give you a rash or interfere with medications. And here's the kicker. Don't eat leafy greens because it interferes with other medications, and mainly the ones that they're talking about are the anticoagulants. And so my specialty is working with people with diabetes, and I have people with diabetes on anticoagulant drugs. And so when this first started happening, and before I really understood the full health message, I would abide by this. And eventually, I'm just like, well, I wonder why. Why are we told to get rid of greens? And so I went to an anticoagulant nurse and I said, why is this? And she told me that because of the vitamin K, it balances out the blood clotting just like the anticoagulant medications. And so they start to compete with each other, and it makes it harder to titrate those medications. And I said, oh, so it's basically for the ease of the person then. And so it looks good on labs. And she said, yes. So it's more out of convenience. And so what I said was, okay, what if I work with my people with diabetes and I tell them that because see, the problem is people will have greens and then they drop out. And they have greens and they have huge salads every day for like a week or two, and then for the next couple of weeks they're on vacation and they don't have any salads at all, and then they come home and they have some, and then they don't, and they do. See, that's the problem when it just goes up and down. And so what I do then is I tell my people to have a consistent amount of greens. Now that's when they come to me and say that they want to get off their medications. And of course, I don't remove medications. I'm not a medical doctor, so I work with a doctor or with their anticoagulant nurse, and we work this together. And so, and they know what I'm doing, I know what they're doing, and we have this kind of collaboration. So the patient has agreed then to have a high, consistent, every single day, without exception, high green diet. And they have a green salad, a nice big green salad every single day, and it's amazing how long or I should say how short it takes for them to actually get off of their anticoagulant medications. It's just amazing how that works. And so we're, this ironic thing of, take the drug, but yet don't take the healthy greens. And but if you're on one of these, I'm not saying go off of it. I'm saying talk to your doctor, talk to your nurse, and work through it with them to try to get you off. But then, it tells me then that if you need to be on an anticoagulant medication, that the rest of your diet is probably off as well. So we need to look at everything. So we're also told don't eat strawberries because they're bad for the environment. Now, this is where the question comes with all of the pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, and everything insecticides that are poured onto our produce. People, that's what usually the very first thing that people say. I've given up my produce because of the pesticides and all the things that are sprayed. So let me teach you about a word. It's called bioaccumulation. Strawberries are so filthy in the U.S. because there's a group called the Environmental Working Group that every year they take just conventionally grown produce and they go to these big box stores around the country, and then they test how many chemicals are on these produce. So they don't just take it from one part of the country, they take it from all over the United States, and they take a nice wide variety of produce. And so they have something called the Dirty Dozen, and then they also have something called the Clean 15. And that Dirty Dozen, strawberries have always, for many years, it has been the #1 dirtiest fruit on the market. Filthy. It's got like 15 different pesticides. I can't remember the number. It is a huge amount of number. It is actually, if you go to the Environmental Working Group website, you'll actually see a write-up showing a research that says that strawberries are so incredibly filthy that you can juice them and spray them right onto the field from the juice, and they act as a pesticide again. That's how filthy they are. But yet I will never tell someone to not eat conventionally grown strawberries. Never. Why? Because of bioaccumulation. Bioaccumulation, let me explain it to you in the fish world, and it happens on land animals and every place else, but this bioaccumulation, say you've got all these little fish that are this big, and then you've got a fish this big that comes and eats, I don't know, how many fish a day do they eat? 20, 50, 100? I don't know how many they eat, but all these little tiny fish have toxins in them, and because that's just the way life goes anymore. And our oceans are very, very toxic. And so as they are enjoying their meals, these little fish, the toxins continue to accumulate in their muscles and in their fat. And now you have a fish this big that eats I don't know, 20 or 50 of these every single day. And these little fish are now 5 years old, and that's 5 years of accumulation in their bodies, and it doesn't go away. And now you've got this fish that is this big, eating 20 or 30, 50 of these fish a day for the next 5 years, and they have now accumulated all of those toxins that come from those little fish. And now you get a fish this big, then that eats several of those fish that are this big, and that's eaten all those fish that are this big, and now every single larger fish that eats of these fish, it continues to accumulate. And if these fish live 5 years old, 1 year old, it doesn't matter, 10 years old, whatever they are, they continue to bioaccumulate all of these toxins from everything else that they're eating. And there's no way to cook it out, there's no way to freeze it out, there's no way to dry it out. You cannot get it out because it's embedded into the muscles and into the fat. And so now when we eat the fish, now we eat all of that bioaccumulation that has been in that fish for 5 years or 2 years or 1 year, whatever it is. But it's accumulated multiple times more than what we ever find on produce. That's why I would never tell someone to not eat regular strawberries. Now, would I prefer them to eat organic? Yes. Can everyone afford organic? No. When we look at the research that's out there that is done on like Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead from several years ago, and any of the other ones, they are done with conventionally grown produce. Conventionally grown. And they're juicing and they're eating all these plants, and they are reversing cancer and diabetes and bowel disease and all sorts of diseases. And they are eating conventionally grown produce and still reversing their disease. So if you cannot afford organic, totally fine. If you can afford it, go for it. So that so you see that's why it doesn't hold water when people say that they're going to give up produce because of the toxins. We're not really looking at the big picture here. So let's look at the big picture. And plus, God says, your diet, I command your diet. He doesn't give us an excuse. Well, if it's got, if it's sprayed, don't eat it. Where is that? I mean, yes, we can read in counsels on diet and foods that we should have things that are uncontaminated, but the reality is not everyone can afford organic. And in some places, it's not even available. So let's stick with our counsel. And if that's what God says, then let's righteousness by faith. Then we just have to trust that He's going to help us to heal. We're also told that fad diets we are to exclude our fruit, and yet that is our counsel. Cut down or eliminate it. Fruit reduces the risk of all sorts of diseases, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, cancer, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, stroke. It promotes bone health, detoxification, and bowel disease, and autoimmune disease, and the list just goes on and on. There are very few and eye disease, there's very few diseases that a high fruit diet will not touch. And I'm going to continue to go on that. So let's kind of break this down now. Why are we told for people with diabetes? I'm going to give you an example of the half-truth and half-lie of Genesis 3:1. And that goes for any disease, whether it's cancer, diabetes, or anything, because we're told don't eat fruit if you have these diseases, or if you're trying to lose weight, don't eat fruit because you're going to get fat. So I would like to share again, how does this happen? So when we are eating fruit or glucose, which the fruit breaks down into glucose, we have tasters in our pancreas, and they are constantly tasting the sweetness of the blood. So like multiple times a second, it is tasting our blood. And so as soon as our blood sugars start to rise, And these little taste testers say, oh, okay, our blood sugar is rising. It tells the pancreas to produce more insulin. And now then the insulin then goes into the insulin receptor site. I would point to it, but this doesn't show up here. Yeah, so I can't point to it. But it will, so we see that the glucose will go into the muscles. It goes into the liver. Our liver is a storage unit for our glucose. And then the glucose is taken by the insulin because the insulin is a key lock. And the insulin receptor site, that blue square in that cell, it is a, that would be like your door handle or your door lock into your house. So if you're going to get into your house, you put the key into the lock, you open the door handle, you open the door, all the humans walk into the house, and you close the door behind you. That's the same principle with the insulin and the insulin receptor site. So you put the insulin, the key, into the insulin receptor site, the doorknob, it unlocks it, it creates a reaction, the door opens, all the sugar goes in, when the cell is full, the door closes, blood sugars go to normal again. That's the way it's supposed to happen. But now when we start to lose or gain weight, what happens is on the left-hand side, where you see fat cells, we see that our fat cells are supposed to be kind of flat and squishy. But when we gain weight, and you see the insulin receptor site is a normal door handle there. But now when we start to gain weight to the right, the yellow, and now it becomes really big. When our fat cells start to grow, now we start to grow. And it changes the insulin receptor site. So the shape of the door handle now changes, and now the insulin can't get in. By now you should be saying, wait a minute, why am I taking insulin when there's nothing wrong with my insulin? You see, there's nothing wrong with the insulin. The problem becomes the insulin receptor site. And now when we're eating fruit, and so when we are eating animal products of any kind, it clogs the insulin receptor site even if it is of a normal shape. Now I've got, not only is it clogged because of all of that saturated fat and the cholesterol, now I've gained weight because the insulin can't get into the muck and gunk of the door lock, and so now I start to gain weight and my blood sugars start to go up twofold because one, the normal shape insulin receptor site has clogged, the key can't get in, and then two, now I start gaining weight, my blood sugars start going up, my insulin receptor site starts to change shape, and now I'm doubly in problem. Now I'm in double trouble. And so what needs to happen, we need to stop the input of all of that cholesterol and saturated fat, aka animal protein, animal products, and then by a default, we're just going to start losing weight. And now my insulin receptor site now goes to a normal shape. My insulin gets in, it opens the door, my blood sugars go down, and voila. On a whole food plant-based diet without any animal products, my diabetes goes away, as long as I don't revert back to the way that I used to eat. It's just so simple. But see, Satan's war on fruit says it stops at the insulin resistance. When either because it gets clogged with all of that animal products, we're told don't eat fruit. See, that's the half lie. Because when my insulin receptor sites are clogged and I eat fruit or any carbohydrates, yes, my sugar does go up. See, God says you can eat of every tree. He said that, but don't eat of that one. And yes, my sugars may go up, but it's not because of the sugar. It's that half lie. It's because of animal products. It's the animal products that are the problem, not the fruit. So we need to eliminate the animal products and the problem just kind of goes away on its own. That's how a plant-based diet works, a whole food plant-based diet. So when we look at inspiration, we can see, and this is really important, this all comes out of the spirit of prophecy. We may use fruit freely and in different ways and run no risk of incurring the diseases that are incurred by using the flesh of diseased animals. So we are told that we use fruit freely. Notice that word freely, and that we will run no risk. None. That means that fruit does not cause these animal product diseases. It's the same inspiration. It's the same inspiration that wrote the spirit of prophecy as that wrote the love letter to us in the Bible. It's the same spirit of prophecy. It's the same God. So he's telling us that we can use fruit freely. And notice the word freely. And now notice this next one. She, your wife, lacks vitality and needs a generous, strengthening diet. So here's a woman who is weak, and God says use a generous, strengthening diet. And how does he define that? She should have a good supply of fruit and not be confined to the same things from day to day. She has a slender hold on life. That means she is at the end of her life. Who knows? Maybe she had stage 4 cancer. I have no idea. But she is diseased, and the wants of her system are far different from those of a healthy person. And we are told, our counsel, high fruit. And yet, fruit is one of the first things that is removed from people if they have cancer, advanced cases of diabetes, all sorts of issues. That's the first thing removed. But yet God says different. Let's forget what the world says. Let's focus on what God says. For a dyspeptic stomach, which is indigestion, you may place upon your table fruits of different kinds, but not too many at one meal. I'm highlighting these words because I'm going to show you what a food guide pyramid looks like according to the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. The more we depend upon the fresh fruit, just as it is plucked from the tree, the greater will be the blessing. A plain, simple, but liberal supply. She never uses these words when it comes to vegetables. As wonderful as vegetables are, she only uses these words reserved for fruit. Fruit only. A fruit diet for a few days has often brought great relief to brain workers. We're talking about a fruit fast here. For a couple of days, all you're eating is just fruit. And I'll tell you, you want some energy? Wonderful way to get some energy. And she does not ever say, have a vegetable fast. It's a fruit fast. Wherever fruit can be grown in abundance, a liberal supply should be prepared for winter. Apples are superior to any fruit for a standby that grows. All should be acquainted with the special value of fruits and vegetables fresh from the orchard and garden. Do not eat largely of salt. Avoid the use of pickles and spiced foods. Eat an abundance of fruit. She doesn't say eat an abundance of vegetables or starches or beans or nuts and seeds. No, she's saying fruit. It would be well for us to do less cooking and to eat more fruit in its natural state. We're talking about just eating raw fruits and vegetables, raw fruit here. In its natural state, let us teach the people to eat freely of fresh grapes, apples, peaches, pears, berries, and all other kinds of fruit that can be obtained. And let these be prepared for winter by canning, using glass as far as possible instead of tin. Let them impart this knowledge as they would Bible instruction. This is Bible instruction. You see, God tells us, and right there in Genesis 2:16, that he commands our diet, and that is a high fruit diet. And so this matches with the Bible. It's not like this is some obscure person writing, on who knows what. This is actually, it fits with the Bible, and it fits with Revelation 22:2, along with the diet of heaven. So it's Bible instruction. Let them teach the people to preserve the health and to increase the strength by avoiding the large amount of cooking that has filled the world with chronic invalids. And how much of our food are we actually eating raw? How many fruits and vegetables are we eating raw without cooking? The far majority of us have probably 90% of our food is cooked. So if you're looking to reverse disease, prevent disease in yourself or somebody else, here I'm giving you the recipe. It's right from God. It's right from the pen of inspiration. We're given instruction in how to reverse and prevent disease. You see, when I give talks like this, I don't have to do one-on-ones with people because it's right there with God. And so we see that so even if we're eating a whole food plant-based diet, we need to cut down on the large amount of cooking and start adding more fresh fruits and vegetables because that's where the power of healing is. Let those who advocate health reform strive earnestly to make it all they claim it is. Let them discard everything detrimental to health. It says everything. It doesn't say most. It doesn't say 99%. It says everything. 100%. One bite, and that's why we are in the mess that we are today. One bite in the Garden of Eden. One bite. God cares about every single one bite. That is not legalistic. That's the Bible. Let those who advocate use simple, wholesome food. Fruit is excellent and saves much cooking. We see that when we look at the nutrient panel of foods, of fruit, we see that all fruit is a superfood. It doesn't matter what fruit you have anywhere in the world. If you can get a hold of fruit, just eat it. Whatever you have, just eat it. And that it's not the fruit that causes obesity and diabetes and cancer and candida and fatty liver and other symptoms and all these things that fruit is being blamed for. It's the meat. It's the animal products that God tells us that we're not to eat. And if we are eating even clean meat, unless we are eating it kosher, we are already in disobedience because we are told that we are not to eat the fat or blood of an animal, and that is in the New and the Old Testament. And so we need to look at Satan's lies here, because in 3:1 again, Genesis 3:1, we're told that Satan is very subtle. And he gets right into the health message, right there, right with the command. God commands it, and then Satan is like, nah, God didn't really say that. So Satan is the most subtle of all the beasts, and we need to really pay attention. So inspiration on budgeting. Do not practice economy in this direction. This means that God wants us to spend our money on good, wholesome food and to eliminate all of the other things that we spend our money on. Restrict your meat bills, but have plenty of good fruit and vegetables, and then you will enjoy seeing the hearty appetites with which all will partake of your preparation. Never feel that good, hygienic food that is eaten is lost. It will make blood and muscle and good strength for daily duties. And too many times we think that we have to have animal proteins and milk in order to have big, strong bones and to be healthy. I haven't had any of these for almost 30 years. No meat, no cheese, no animal proteins or dairy, no processed sugars, eggs, nothing for 30 years, almost 30 years now. And so, my husband and I are avid hikers. We hike and we can pretty much beat the best of them. And, we are in no lack of strength. We hire young men off farms, farm hands, and this is their livelihood, and they're like 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, and though they may be stronger than me, I always have more endurance than they do. They want to just give up. It's like the hare versus the tortoise, and I just kind of keep on going like the Energizer Bunny, and there's just no stopping me. I am in no lack of need of any energy, of hiking up. I'm hiking up 2,000-3,000 foot elevation mountains, and I'm keeping up with my dog. That's how fast I hike. And so we're also told fruit, if it can be obtained, is the best article of food. It doesn't say vegetables, as wonderful as vegetables are. I'm just trying to make a point here that God is talking about fruit. And let the same amount of money be expended for meat, or that is spent on meat, to be used to purchase fruit. You see, now God's trying to work with our budget here. And every penny expended for tea, coffee, and flesh meat is worse than wasted. For these things hinder the best development of the physical, mental, and spiritual powers. Where did we get that from? Well, we get that right from the Exodus, that God is trying to get his people off of animal products and right onto manna. We see, let fruit placed on the table in abundance. Make fruit the article of food of diet to be placed on your table. And even if we have helpers at our table, a good supply of good fruit, grains, and vegetables should be prepared nicely in wholesome ways. We are responsible for what we put on our table. We are not responsible for what someone else may bring. We're only responsible for us. So what people bring to potlucks or what they bring, at picnics or something, you know what? We just need to leave that with them. That's between them and God. It's not between you and them or me and you. This is we need to each examine ourselves. So the Lord intends to bring his people back. This is back again, to live upon simple fruits, vegetables, and grains. God provided fruit in its natural state for our first parents. In order to know what are the best articles, we must study God's original design for man's diet. The original design, we're going back to Genesis 2:16 and 17. In order to know what are he who created man and who understands his needs appointed Adam his food. Behold, he said, I have given you every herb yielding seed, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for food. By precept and example, make it plain that the food God gave Adam in his sinless state here, that's pre-sin, in which is the best for man's use as we seek to regain that sinless state. To me, hello, this is a red flashing light. We're talking about the 144,000 here. Regain that sinless state. We will never recognize that we are sinless. We will always see ourselves as sinful because we are. If we've even sinned one time in our life, we will never compare to Jesus. And every single one of us have sinned multiple times. And so if we are looking to regain Eden, the way that we do it is through appetite. Again, we can never be saved by what we eat, but we can be lost by what we eat. So in grains, fruits, and vegetables, and nuts are to be found all the food elements that we need. So this tells me that this is a super, super important message. Because remember, health reform is just as much about what I don't eat. At the same time, it says what I do eat. At the same time, eat of these trees, but not of that one. So to not eat unclean foods or to give up animal products, see, that doesn't say anything about, that's not a true health reformer. A health reformer is at the same time of what I do and don't eat. A health reformer says I've given up animal products and I've added a high fruit diet and food that comes from the hand of the Lord. So we are told that also, let no one think that he can do as he pleases in the matter of diet. You cannot afford to do otherwise. Let us comprehend these responsibilities and bear them nobly in the name of the Lord. And while sitting at the table, we may do medical missionary work by eating and drinking to the glory of God. How do we do that? We go right back to Genesis 2:16 and 17, that he commanded our diet. It all just kind of goes hand in hand. And God is trying to reach us higher and higher in our standard, not only by our words, but our practice combined. This is the spirit of prophecy in the Bible Food Guide Pyramid. Now notice, I can't point at all these, but notice under fruit, these words that are used in each of these categories of fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans, and nuts, those are Bible and spirit of prophecy words. Those are not my words. They are directly out of books like Counsels on Diet and Foods and Ministry of Healing in the Bible, and it says abundantly. How do we describe the fruit? It says, and I just read most of these to you, that we are to eat fruit in abundance, freely, liberally, best, superior, blessing, more, fruit fast, depend upon, and largely. So that the far majority of our calories should come from fruit. This is God's natural order for us. And then how are vegetables explained? Notice that these are not the same words as fruit. When she describes vegetables, she says largely with fruit. She never uses the word largely with only vegetables. It's only with fruit. And then encourage with fruit, properly prepared, well prepared. Some cannot use them. She doesn't say some cannot use fruit. She doesn't say well prepared fruit. And instead she says raw fruit, fruit as it's plucked from the tree. How does she describe grains and beans? With fruits and vegetables. It's the diet chosen for us by our Creator. Some cannot use them. Prepare simply and without grease. And then nuts, do not use too much. They're used unwisely. Some are less wholesome than others. Do not use freely. They're too rich, and we are to use between 1/6 and 1/10 of what the recipe calls for. So this is a wonderful lady that I don't know how to. This is a lady who came to my health center in November, and she came to me not being able to walk. We had to carry her into the house. Me and 2 other men had to carry her in. And on day 7, I asked her where her gout was, and she kind of looked up at the ceiling, and she's like, well, I don't know. And I said, well, where is your gout? Like, where was it? I don't know. And I said, so is your pain gone? And she said, yes. And I said, why are you still in your wheelchair then? And she's like, I don't know. And we got her up, and she started walking. I mean, with her walker, but praise God, in 7 days on a health reform diet, high fruit, she was able to get rid of her gout. 7 days. This is a lady. Look at her face. You can see from the left, on the left side, you see how hard her face looks, and the wrinkles, and look how soft her face goes to the right. Just amazing. That's 10 days on health reform. This lady, you can see on the left, you see the wrinkles in her forehead, you see the kind of gaunt look in her eyes, you see the puffiness around her face, and then look at all of that's gone on the right picture. That's 10 days of health reform. Yeah? Yeah, she gave me permission, by the way. So this is that lady. So this was about, I think it was several weeks or a month later that she, this was the one who came to me with the gout, and 7 days later she's walking with her walker, and within a month she is walking on her own unassisted, and that's what this video is. Just amazing. Praise God. That's health reform. All right, so this is a lady. This is another lady who came to me in November as well at my sanitarium, and you can see how high her blood sugar is. I can't point to it, but you can see the glucose random is 16.9. The next one is 18.7. The next one is 19. Then she's got 19.1. She's got a 17.3. You see that she's very high in her ketones down there. That's highlighted, as well as her glucose is 14. Now she came to me wearing a continuous glucose monitor, and she was finally, I'm used to people telling me after like the first 3 or 4 days, the first 3 days, people's blood sugars do go up. That is very common, and because they're like, oh, my blood sugar's gone up. I thought they're supposed to go down. And I say, give them a chance. Give me a chance. And so I asked her, I said, she's had diabetes for 24 years, completely uncontrolled. And when she came, she was no fruit, no vegetables, hardly anything that was starchy, and high meat and dairy. And I said, so, I just happened when I was talking to her, so what are the foods that you're really afraid of? Fruit and potatoes. And then the conversation went on. She's like, so what are we having? Fruit and potatoes. And her eyes went really wide, and she's like, no. And I said, you know what you've been doing hasn't worked. Let's give it a try. Let's just try something radical and something totally new. And so by the time she was telling me at like day 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 that her blood sugars are plummeting down on 130 to 150 units of insulin a day, she came to me. And so after 7 days, she's telling me how much she's taking, you know, like 15 units now of insulin from 130 to 150. And I finally, I was like, kind of woke up out of my stupor, and I was like, hey, wait, you're wearing a glucose monitor. She's like, yeah, I've been trying to tell you that. And I said, well, let me see what your glucose is doing. So you can see on the top, I can't point to it, but in the top you see she's been, for the last 30 days, that she was at my house 7 of those days. And her glucose already came down to 11.6 just in 7 days. And then you see 40% of her blood sugars are in range. You see 24% very high, 36% high, and she's got 1% very low. And then now, and notice it's November 20th on the very top line, October 22 to November 20th. That's the last 30 days. And notice the next one still has the same date. And so I said, okay, what has your blood sugar been doing on average the last 2 weeks? And 7 of those days are at my house. So she's still November 20th, and her blood sugar dropped to 10.5, 58% in range. And now, and I said, okay, what's it been doing for the last 7 days that you've been at my house? Still November 20th. 7 days, her blood sugar is down to 8.6 and 91% in range. And look at this. And I said, what's the last 2 days? Yesterday and today, still November 20th. Here she is, 8.6, 98% in range. And then the next day, you can see November 21st, I said, okay, what was yesterday and today doing? And you can see that now she's 100% in range. High fruit diet, all off of all animal products, and because of her fear of potatoes, I even served her a baked potato bar. I wanted to just totally shatter her fear of fruit and potatoes. And I do that to all the people with diabetes that come. What's your most fearful fruit or food? Whatever they tell me, that's what we're having. It doesn't matter, because as long as it's whole food, plant-based. And I mean, how amazing is that? That's God's health reform. So I talked about the difference between $2 for that. I mean, that's like, you know, how can we pass that up? For $2, at least I can get my stomach full, right? And that's all it does, is just empty calories. All it does is just, you know, give me disease. So unfortunately, you know, this is just somebody that was a random person in front of me in the checkout. And I was like, wow, look at those foods. And then I was looking at my foods, and everything on the conveyor belt, you know, everything was plant foods. And then there was this, and I was like, wow, I got to take a picture of that. Unfortunately, God's people are still into pills and surgery. We don't take the time to actually ask God how I can reverse and prevent my disease. Natural law says that we are what we eat. So what does this look like? I'm just going to kind of quickly go through some of these pictures of what a health reform diet looks like from my understanding, from what I've shared. So you can see that is mine, and the plate on the right is my husband's. I don't eat any processed foods, so I don't eat the granola, but you know, there's nothing wrong with it. I just choose not to eat it, and but he still eats it. So you can see how much fruit there is. That's a huge amount of fruit. I mean, when I have fruit, I mean, my bowl, I mean, I'm like in a serving size bowl of fruit. And if I don't get enough fruit, I get cranky. Because to me, that's where my energy comes from. Oh, and this, so you'll see on the top right, what I've done was I've added greens. So I think that we should not be mixing fruits and vegetables in the same meal, but I do consider greens to be a neutral. And there's lots of people who do believe that as well. And I think that's why the green smoothie craze, you know, has just taken off so much. Because I do believe that greens were actually in the Garden of Eden. And so this is what my counter looks like after shopping. And unfortunately, I took this picture after I put things in the freezer and the refrigerator. So that's just what was on my counter. And then we have another, the brown chapati looking is a flatbread made with 100% flax. And then you see, I love to have smoothie bowls. And then on the red plate, that is it's a black bean bread. And then I've got some homemade granola up there with, you see how, and then you see my homemade waffles there. And then up on the right, I've got some millet here. So you see how the starch is it's a side dish. Most people make their starches the main dish, but make your fruit the main dish, and then your starch a secondary dish. So fill up on fruit. And then we've got another smoothies again, and on the bottom right, that is a banana split. And for those of no, okay. So what I do, this is those of you who might want to do like a fruit fast for a couple of days. This is a wonderful way to do a fruit fast. So it's a banana. That red ice cream on the left is 100% raspberries, and then the middle scoop is 100% banana, and that yellow scoop on the right is 100% mango that I've made with my champion juicer with frozen fruit. And once it goes through, it comes out frozen like ice cream. And then the brown gooey stuff that's dripping down is only dates and water. That's it, just dates and water. And then I've got some chopped nuts. And this bread here is 100% buckwheat with some hummus. And you see, those are not small plates. They are giant plates. They're good size. And I do often have a melon cleanse. And then this bread here on the left is 100% oat bread. And you'll see chia on the upper right with dates. I love to have dates with stuffed with peanut butter as a dessert. And then here's another smoothie, and now that's carob. That carob is actually comes from the time of John the Baptist, because John the Baptist, carob is locust. Locust is carob, and so it's a representative of fruit. And I talked about that this morning. And here's a green smoothie. And I love my greens. I have a ton of greens every single day, just love them.